was richer than I'd ever been in my life, and she gave that money to me before I even did anything to earn it. Besides which, somebody else said, she offered you half of the profits on the Dynapack. I looked around at the faces for signs of hostility. I saw none. That was surprising. I'd come from the past to steal something from them, and they weren't at all angry. Well, no, it wasn't really stealing. I wouldn't be depriving them of the Dynapack. It just would have been invented before it was supposed to be. She did, I said, though I wouldn't call that part of it philanthropy. She needed me for the data, and I needed her to manufacture the things. And she was a very beautiful woman, Blundell added. I squirmed a bit. Yes. Mr. Weldon, we know a good deal about her from notes that have come down to us among her private papers. She had a safety deposit box under a false name. I won't tell you the name. It was not discovered until many years later, and we will not voluntarily meddle with the past. I sat up and listened sharply. So that's how you knew who I was, and what I'd be wearing, and what I came for. You even knew when and where I'd arrive. Correct, Blundell said. What else do you know? That you suspected her of being responsible for the deaths of many old people by starvation. Your suspicion was justified, except that her father had caused all those that occurred before 1947, when she took over after his own death. All but 2 people were sent into the past. Roberts was curious about the future, of course, but he did not want to waste a victim on a trip that would probably be fruitless. In the past, you understand, he knew precisely what he was after. The future was completely unknown territory. But she took the chance, I said. If you can call deliberate murder taking a chance, yes. One man arrived in 2094, over 50 years ago. The other was yourself. The first one, as you know, died of malnutrition when he was brought back to your era. And what happened to me? I asked, jittering. You will not die. We intend to make sure of that. All the other victims, I presume you're interested in their errands? I think I know, but I'd like to find out just the same. They were sent to the past to buy or steal treasures of various sorts. Art, sculpture, jewelry, fabulously valuable manuscripts and books, anything that had great scarcity value. That's not possible, I objected. She had all the money she wanted. Anytime she needed more, all she had to do was send somebody back to put down bets and buy stocks that she knew were winners. She had the records, didn't she? There was no way she or her father could lose. He moved his shoulders in a plum and gold shrug. Most of the treasures they accumulated were for acquisition's sake, and for the sake of vengeance for the way they believed Dr. Roberts had been treated. When there were unusual expenses, such as replacing the very costly parts of the time machine, that required more than they could produce in ready cash, both Roberts and his daughter discovered these treasures. He waited while I digested the miserable meal and the disturbing information he had given me. I thought I'd found a loophole in his explanation. You said people were sent back to the past to buy treasures, besides stealing them. I did, he agreed. They were provided with currency of whatever era they were to visit. I felt my forehead wrinkle up as my theory fell apart. Then they could buy food. Why should they have died of malnutrition? Because, as May Roberts herself told you, nothing can exist before it exists. Neither can anything exist after it is out of existence. If you returned with a Dynapack, for example, it would revert to a lump of various metals, because that was what it was in your period. But let me give you a more personal instance. Do you remember coming back from your first trip with dust on your hand? Yes, I must have fallen. On one hand? No, Mr. Weldon. May Roberts was greatly upset by the incident. She was afraid you would realize why the hamburger had turned to dust and why the old people died of starvation. All of them, not just a few. He paused, giving me a chance to understand what he had just said. I did, with a sick shock. If I ate your food, I said shakily, I'd feel satisfied until I returned to my own time, but the food wouldn't go along with me. Blundell nodded gravely. And so you too would die of malnutrition. The foods we have given you existed in your era. We were very careful of that. So careful that many of them probably were stored years before you left your time. We regret that they are not very palatable, but at least we are positive they will go back with you. You will be as healthy when you arrive in the past as when you left. Incidentally, she made you change your clothes for the same reason. They had been made in 1930. She had clothing from every era she wanted visited and chose old people who would fit them best. Otherwise, you see, they'd have arrived naked. I began to shake as if I were as old as I'd pretended to be on the stage. She's going to pull me back. If I don't bring her information about the Dynapack, she'll shoot me. That, Mr. Weldon, is our problem, Blundell said, putting his hand comfortingly on my arm to calm me. Your problem? I'm the one who'll get shot, not you. But we know in complete detail what will happen when you are returned to the 20th century. I pulled my arm away and grabbed his. You know that? Tell me! I'm sorry, Mr. Weldon. If we tell you what you did, you might think of some alternate action, and there is no knowing what the result would be. But I didn't get shot or die of malnutrition. That much we can tell you. Neither. They all stood up, so bright and attractive in their colorful clothes that I felt like a shirt-sleeved stagehand who'd wandered in on a costume play. You will be returned in a month, according to the notes May Roberts left. She gave you plenty of time to get the data, you see. We propose to make that month an enjoyable one for you. The resources of our city, and any others you care to visit, are at your disposal. We wish you to take full advantage of them. And the Dynapack? Let us worry about that. We want you to have a good time while you are our guest. I did. It was the most wonderful month of my life. The mesh cage blurred around me. I could see May Roberts through it, her hand just leaving the switch. She was as beautiful as ever, but I saw beneath her beauty the vengeful, vicious creature her father's bitterness had turned her into. Blundell and Carr had let me read some of her notes, and I knew. I wished I could have spent the rest of my years in the future instead of having to come back to this. She came over and opened the gate, smiling like an angel, welcoming a bright new soul. Then her eyes traveled startledly over me, and her smile almost dropped off, but she held it firmly in place. She had to, while she asked, "Do you have the notes I sent you for?" "Right here," I said. I reached into my breast pocket and brought out a stubby automatic and shot her through the right arm. Her closed hand opened and a little derringer clanked on the floor. She gaped at me with an expression of horrified surprise that should have been recorded permanently. It would have served as a model for generations of actors and actresses. "You brought back a weapon!" she gasped. "You shot me!" She stared vacantly at her bleeding arm and then at my automatic. "But you can't bring anything back from the future. And you aren't dying of malnutrition." She said it all in a voice shocked into toneless wonder. "The food I ate and this gun are from the present," I said. "The people of the future knew I was coming. They gave me food that wouldn't vanish from my cells when I returned. They also gave me the gun instead of the plans for the Dynapack." "And you took it?" she screamed at me. "You idiot! I'd have shared the profits honestly with you. You'd have been worth millions." "With acute malnutrition," I amended. "I like it better this way, thanks. Poor, but alive. Or relatively poor, I should say, because you've been very generous, and I appreciate it. By shooting me." I hated to puncture that lovely arm, but it wasn't as painful as starving or getting shot myself. "Now, if you don't mind, or even if you do, it's your turn to get into the cage, Miss Roberts." She tried to grab for the derringer on the floor with her left hand. "Don't bother," I said quietly. "You can't reach it before a bullet reaches you." She straightened up, staring at me for the first time with terror in her eyes. "What are you going to do to me?" she whispered. "I could kill you as easily as you could have killed me. Kill you and send your body into some other era. How many dozens of deaths were you responsible for? The law couldn't convict you of them, but I can, and I couldn't be convicted either." She put her hand on the wound. Blood seeped through her fingers as she lifted her chin at me. "I won't beg for my life, Weldon, if that's what you want. I could offer you a partnership, but I'm not really in a position to offer it, am I?" She was magnificent, terrifyingly intelligent, brave clear through, and deadlier than a plague. I had to remember that. "Into the cage," I said. "I have some friends in the future who have plans for you. I won't tell you what they are, of course. You didn't tell me what I'd go through, did you? Give my friends my fondest regards. If I can manage it, I'll visit them, and you." She backed warily into the cage. It would have been pleasant to kiss those wonderful lips goodbye. I'd thought about them for a whole month, wanting them and loathing them at the same time. It would have been like kissing a coral snake. I knew it, and I concentrated on shutting the gate on her. "You'd like to be rich, wouldn't you, Weldon?" she asked through the mask.